So, very common behavior if you're heading towards a divorce in your marriage. So, those are the four. So, I'm just going to review them here real quick. So, we have criticism, we have contempt, we have defensiveness, and stonewalling. So if those four are prevalent in your marriage, or any one of them are prevalent in your marriage to a high degree, it's very likely that you're heading towards divorce. And so now's the time to kind of evaluate that, to stop and say, okay, this is present in my marriage, and I can change myself. I can change my behaviors. I may not be able to change my spouse's behavior. Now, you oftentimes can through love and through kindness and through changing your own behavior. You can soften the heart of your spouse to where they want to change, and when that happens, that's a beautiful thing, and hopefully that's what happens in every case. But we know that it doesn't always happen that way. But ideally, that's the way it should happen. But it first starts with softening your own heart and being willing to change. Hello and welcome, my friend, to the Incredible Fathers podcast, where we conquer mental challenges, eliminate fear, and build righteous families. I'm Phillip Mason. I'm your host, and delighted to spend some time with you here today. So I just want to start off today. A couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to go with my family, with another family friend and their family, and we went camping in Colorado. So we were up in the mountains, and it was interesting. We were hiking in an area that had a lot of gold mines in the late 1800s to early 1900s. And as we were walking through some of these trails past some of these abandoned gold mines, we got talking about life, and we got eventually talking about marriage. And the husband of this family, he was a licensed marriage counselor. And so he had met with many couples over the years. And so I was asking him how he viewed marriage, and generally if he thought most marriages were healthy or not. And his conclusion right away, he was just very firm with me. He says, my conviction is that most marriages are not healthy, and that they live well below their privileges of what they could be experiencing, having just a really strong, healthy marriage that's full of joy and happiness. And he really sincerely believed this based on his experience as a professional. And I think that's absolutely true. I think that's right. I think most marriages could be a lot better than what they are, especially in today's world where there's so many distractions, so many things that keep us from developing good, healthy marital relations. So I think one of the lessons that we can learn from this is that even the best marriages can have problems and issues. Now, how do you know if your marriage is heading towards divorce? Or probably the better question is, how do you know if your marriage is heading towards bliss and happiness, right? Because that's what we want in our marriage. We want that connection between husband and wife to be super strong, super powerful, super rewarding, and full of love, right? So Dr. John Gottman has done a lot of amazing studies over the years. He did a lot of this research at the University of Washington, and he's written a lot in different books over the years. Dr. Gottman, he came up with four main indicators that I'll share with you today of how to know if your marriage is heading towards divorce. And these are really good indicators, a lot of good research to back this up. And so let's go through these four together today. And now some of these aren't going to be anything new. You've heard me talk about them before, but I think in the context of evaluating our marriage right now, how is it? What does it look like? And on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most successful, 1 being near divorce, where would you rate your marriage? So let's go through these four together. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is criticism. Now, criticism can be incredibly destructive. There's a lot of negativity that comes with criticism, and it literally can tear a marriage apart. So one of the main skills of a healthy marriage and of partners in a marriage is being able to talk through issues and to be able to disagree on things and to respectively discuss them out until coming to a conclusion or determination on what to do. And sometimes there may not be a conclusion. Sometimes just acknowledging that both of you have a different viewpoint on this particular issue. It's okay. Some of the best people I know in my life, and I think of my grandparents. My grandparents had a really great marriage. But I know that there was times where they they disagreed because as a child, I remember being a third party witness to some of their disagreements. But they did it very respectfully. Sometimes there was some intensity in their conversations, but they always resolved it and they had respect for each other and they moved on. So I think that's a really important skill. Criticism can look like a lot of different things, but one of the things that's most destructive that Dr. Gottman talks about is when you're attacking the other person's personality or you're attacking their character. And that can be incredibly destructive in a marriage. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, what if my spouse does have really terrible character? What if my spouse really does have a personality problem? What if their personality is really hard to deal with? And granted, that may certainly be the case. There may be some truth to that, right? But the wisdom here is not to criticize your spouse for their personality or character. Rather, you talk through those issues in a very respectful way. So we could spend a whole episode just talking about how to do that, and we'll do that in another episode. But that's the first one, criticism. Beware of criticism. So if there's a lot of criticism going on in your marriage, especially in regards to attacking personality and then also character, you can know that your marriage is probably not where it needs to be and maybe heading towards divorce. Okay, so let's move on to the second one. So number 2 is contempt. That's a great word, contempt. What is contempt? So, contempt can be insulting or demeaning your spouse. Insulting or demeaning your spouse. So, you either indicate through words or actions. It may be facial expressions, it may be body language. You are thinking of the other person as being stupid, incompetent, a fool, someone who's disgusting. If you're emanating that type of feeling or contempt towards your spouse, they're not going to want to be around you very long, right? And they may develop similar feelings towards you as well. So this is another very strong indicator. So this is number 2, contempt from Dr. John Gottman. So if you're experiencing that a lot in your marriage, you may be heading towards divorce. That's another great indicator. We're going to go to number 3, which is defensiveness. So number 3 is defensiveness. Now, what do we mean by that? When you're responding defensively to complaints or criticism or contempt by making excuses, denying, arguing, whining, or counter blaming rather than trying to solve problems. That's what we mean by defensiveness. I think one that's huge is making excuses. I think as adults, uh, and our children do this fairly often, right? And we kind of have to train them away from it. But we can make excuses for our bad behavior, our poor behavior, and sometimes there may be some legitimate reasons for that poor behavior. And we should be forgiving towards one another if that's the case. But oftentimes our excuses are just that. They're just excuses and they neither justify us nor help us. And so if you're being very defensive every time you talk with your spouse, if that's coming across in your attitude and your verbiage and in your body language, you need to be very careful of that because your divorce may be imminent. It may be heading your way. If that's something that's a very strong component of your marriage and your communication with your spouse. So just be aware of that. Another one that I think is huge on defensiveness, we talked about excuses, can be whining. A lot of times we have a tendency to whine or to complain, and that's not healthy. If we're murmuring, complaining, whining, that really is a form of defensiveness where we're trying to protect ourselves or protect our position or trying to be right even when we know we are right, or even when we know we're wrong, either way, always coming across that way can be very destructive. Really, and we could spend a whole nother episode talking about this, but really, we need to be in a situation where we are open and we can communicate freely and we can talk about issues without being defensive. That's a really important skill. I'll just throw this in real quick here, but it's kind of interesting if you watch any sort of political interaction. A lot of times there is tons of criticism, and then right back there's a tons of defensiveness, and it really creates contention. It creates friction, and it just grates. It rubs. It's no fun, and it just brings about the wrong spirit into the room and the wrong spirit to the relationship, and it oftentimes festers and it gets worse and worse. So big, huge indicators that things are not right when there's contention. We see it a lot in media, we see it a lot in the political arena, but it's something that does not belong, absolutely does not belong in our human relationships, especially in our marriages. So just kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so we're moving on to number four. So we just got done talking about number three, defensiveness, and now number four, stonewalling. So stonewalling is a big one. I think it's important for people to realize that most of us have been guilty of all four of these, and stonewalling is actually a very common one. We do it frequently times as human beings. But this is where you're withdrawing physically from your spouse, and you're withholding yourself from your spouse. You're not talking to them emotionally. You're not sharing your eye contact or your actual physical affection may be lacking with your spouse. So those are all can all be indicators. So anytime you're withdrawing emotionally or physically from your spouse, that's stonewalling. So if you have a disagreement, for example, and your spouse wants things done a certain way and you're angry that they want it done that certain way. And so instead of just continuing to talk about it, you withdraw from it and you just don't say anything to your spouse. You don't talk to them, you leave them out of things, you don't acknowledge them when you walk by. That's stonewalling. So very common behavior if you're heading towards a divorce in your marriage. So those are the four. So I'm just going to review them here real quick. So we have criticism, we have contempt, we have defensiveness, and stonewalling. So if those four are prevalent in your marriage, or any one of them are prevalent in your marriage to a high degree, it's very likely that you're heading towards divorce. And so now's the time to kind of evaluate that, to stop and say, okay, this is present in my marriage, and I can change myself. I can change my behaviors. I may not be able to change my spouse's behavior. Now, you oftentimes can through love and through kindness and through changing your own behavior. You can soften the heart of your spouse to the where they want to change. And when that happens, that's a beautiful thing. And hopefully that's what happens in every case. But we know that it doesn't always happen that way. But ideally, that's the way it should happen. But it first starts with softening your own heart and being willing to change. So these four things, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling, if you can change in these four areas and remove them out of your life, it's very likely that you're going to have a very successful marriage and you're going to reverse things. You're going to turn on a dime and be able to pivot and point yourself away from that divorce and towards a very happy, very productive, very satisfying marriage, and a marriage that can unleash a lot of potential in um, happiness and communication, and be able to have a higher degree of love in your marriage, and also a higher degree of human intimacy, which when you really love and serve someone and these four things are absent, then human intimacy really goes to another level and it really becomes celestial, it really becomes heavenly. So those are the four right there. Now, Dr. John Gottman, he talks about these four things as being the negatives. Now, he also talks about what we call a 5-to-1 ratio. He refers to it as a 5-to-1 ratio, and this is from his research. So this isn't just shooting from the hip. This is actual. He's actually done studies on this, very numerical, statistical in nature, where he's gathered a lot of data on this, and he's got it down to a science. So this 5-to-1 ratio is saying for every one negative interaction, you should have five positive interactions. So the 5-to-1 ratio, I'll repeat it one more time. So for every five positive interactions, you should only have one negative interactions. If that is the case, it is very, very likely that your marriage is stable and is in a very good place. If you're much higher than that, on the negative side, your marriage is in danger of being unstable and eventually maybe heading towards divorce. So you need to be very careful of that. Now, I think it's important, like, sometimes people think that their marriage has to be perfect, like, there has to be no negative interactions for their relationship to be perfect or for them to be worthy of being married together. And I just kinda wanna clear that up here and now, is that every marriage, whether it's healthy or otherwise, is gonna have some is going to have some negative interactions to it. There's no such thing as a perfect marriage, and we live in a fallible world. We live in a very difficult, challenging world to live in, and so there's going to be times where when you have two intelligent people who marry each other, where they have different viewpoints on things. It's going to happen. And so you can't get around it. You just have to work through it. You have to discuss it. You have to keep communication channels open. If you don't, then criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling are going to creep in, and they're going to be a big part of your marriage. And they will lead to the destruction of your marriage if you're not careful. They will lead to divorce. So those those things need to be cleaned up and pushed out of your marriage. And if you will do that, you will be able to bulletproof your marriage. It's just important to recognize that even great marriages need improvement. And if you think that you aren't vulnerable in your marriage, that's exactly at the point when you start becoming vulnerable in your marriage. So I'm going to say that one more time because this is so critical. If you think you're not vulnerable in your marriage, that is the exact moment when you start becoming vulnerable in your marriage. So if you have a great marriage, just know that that can change and don't let it change, especially if you're starting to notice criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling creeping in your marriage. Those are powerful indicators, tried and true indicators that your marriage is heading the wrong direction. Now, this vulnerability, being vulnerable in a marriage is very important, and also recognizing that your marriage may fall or may slip and not be a good healthy marriage anymore, may not be stable anymore. When you think that you're not vulnerable anymore, that's really a symptom of pride or a really relating to the principle of pride. So, your pride causes you to let your guard down and you start trying as hard as you normally would to, and you start becoming complacent in your marriage. And we don't want that complacency in the marriage. And that's where those four things can slip in again: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling, those key indicators. So don't let your guard down. Superman has his kryptonite. You have your kryptonite. Don't let it sap your strength, and don't let it cause you additional pain. So that's the goal here with these 4 points from Dr. John Gottman. All right. So my challenge for you today is I want you to take a day. It could be, if you want to do it for the entire week, that would be even more powerful. But just take one day, a normal day where you have plenty of interactions with your spouse. And I want you to be able to make a tally. On one column, I want you to tally the positive interactions you have with your spouse. And the other column, I want you to tally up the negative interactions you have with your spouse. And then I want you to compare it and form a ratio to it and see where you're at. Are you near that 5-to-1 ratio? If you are, you may be nearing divorce. And maybe you're at the point where you're already like, I got it, Phillip. I already know that that's where I'm at. And maybe for some of you, this is the indicator that lets you know, hey, I need to start correcting some of my patterns of behavior. There's a reason why I'm unhappy and things aren't going the way I want them to go. This is a very good litmus test. This is a very good test to find out if you have some kryptonite in your marriage and if you're heading towards divorce. Well, I've really enjoyed our time together, my friend. It's been a pleasure to be with you. And I know that if you apply these principles that we've talked about and eliminate some of these things in your marriage, it'll help direct you towards a more successful, more stable marriage. And it's been a delight being with you today. And I look forward to being with you again on our next episode. Have a good day.